whoosh, down came the Spirit, and again, a conviction on my heart, because this is your home. Hello, I am Brother Francisco Whitaker, and this is All Good in the Brotherhood. Today, I wanted to share with you something that I have been asked by a lot of people to put out here, which is my vocation story. Why did I become a monk? And it's kind of funny when I started getting requests for this, because I realized there are not a lot of people who know the full story as to why I became a monk. A lot of my friends and certainly my family do, but not a whole lot of people know the full extent to my vocation story. So I'm actually pretty excited to share this. So in a way, it actually starts way, way back to when I was a little kid, probably about 7 years old. When I first started feeling an attraction to the idea of being a priest. So my great uncle, he's now deceased, but Father Robert Dwyer was a priest, and just also had some really good examples growing up of diocesan pastors who really showed me kind of the nature of and love for the priesthood. What would be cooler than being a priest? I kind of thought priests were like almost celebrities. Everyone knew them. They were cool. They got to say mass. They got to wear those cool vestments. So for a little kid, I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And I remember telling my parents, even when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I think I want to be a priest. Now, as I started to get older, some of that started to fade. Especially in high school, there was kind of this back and forth. I went on this retreat actually my sophomore year of high school, and I really did feel a very strong call for the Lord. Probably the first most tangible experience I've had of the Lord calling me to a vocation there. And I said pretty definitively actually at that time, I'm going to become a priest. But then, some influences on my life changed. This idea of like, oh, well, don't you want to be successful? But then also just the natural desires I had to have a family. I love children so much. I have a nephew and 2 nieces, another little one on the way, and they're a joy. I love having them, play with and goof around with, being their munkle. That's what they call me actually. But at the same time, there is the joy of being able to give them back to their parents when they start getting rowdy, and I don't have to put them to bed. But I love the idea of having my own children. So as I started getting later in high school, I started kind of going back and forth about that. But I still felt this pretty strong call from God to be a priest. So I started the application in my home diocese of Erie, Pennsylvania. And I visited the seminary. I talked to the rector and the vice rector. And in my conversation and meeting with them, it did not bring me a lot of peace. And I just was really getting some weird signals, not wrong signals. We were not on the same page. I was very interested in science in high school, and I was interested in pursuing a degree potentially in science. But in collegiate seminary, you study philosophy, which I understood. But when I said something about it, they kind of said, no, there's definitely no way to study science and not even like extra electives. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of important to me, but maybe I can get over that. And then something else that's been very important for me and continues to be is sports and athleticism, and taking care to train myself. And when talking about that and saying like, oh, there are opportunities for like regular sports or intramurals or something like that, and they were really not forthcoming on opportunities for that either. And you know what? I respect their policies, and I understand that that's how they lead their seminarians. I just did not feel called at 18 to be able to do that. So after some conversations with my home pastor, a couple other priests who I had talked to about being, entering the seminary, they really suggested, well, maybe you should just go to college first. So I was kind of shopping around for different colleges. I grew up in Grove City, Pennsylvania. So there's the wonderful Grove City College, conservative, Christian, independent, private college. That was pretty much in my backyard. My older brother went there. So my parents were heavily influencing me to go there. But something about it just, I didn't think that's where I was meant to be. Well, then I stumbled across St. Vincent, and they were offering a scholarship, particularly for those seeking to enter as biochemistry freshmen. So that was my in. I was like, oh, well, I want to study science, biochemistry, can't think of anything harder. Let's do it. And the thing was, in order to go to St. Vincent versus Grove City, I really needed to find some financial competition. Grove City was way cheaper. I commute. St. Vincent was a bit more expensive. And, I'd have to live on campus. So there was this competition. But one of the selling points I was trying to give my mom was, look, I've thought about being a priest. They got this, I found out anyways, I did not know this to begin with, but they got this group of monks there. I mean, come on, what better way to discern than be on this place with a bunch of monks? Did I want to be a monk? No. Did I have any idea what a monk was? Not really. I'd heard about them, read about saints, and I knew about St. Benedict, but I really didn't think that monks, as I live them now, were still a thing. Or if they were like old, decrepit, and kind of irrelevant. But, by the grace of God and divine providence, I won that biochemistry scholarship. So I was able to come to St. Vincent. Now, somewhat cursed myself in deciding to be a biochemistry major. Trust me, if you don't really, really, really love it, I don't recommend it. I can't say I loved it. I did it. I actually did pretty well. But it was, God had definitely put other things in my heart. But it was the avenue to get me here. And in Providence, he gave me the grace and tenacity to finish. So I was here, came to St. Vincent, and I started to get to know a monk or two, just, and seeing them walk around, or some of them were my professors in college, or I would try to go to prayer every once in a while because I thought it was cool. But then I started getting involved in campus ministry in the school here, which I work for now, so it's kind of come full circle. But there was two monks particularly, brothers. They're now fathers, but then they were brothers Cassian and Barnabas. So Father Barnabas has been on the podcast before. You can go back and check that episode with him. It's pretty sweet. But the two of them were young guys assigned to campus ministry, to relate with the students, to do activities with them. And it was then that I first started realizing, like, wow, okay, so not all monks are old, decrepit, and boring. And they don't all just sit around being silent and praying all the time. They're actually pretty cool. They're actually really athletic. They're funny. They're, somewhat up to the times. And Barnabas still said lit like 15 years after it was a thing, but, we love him. Anyways, so it just kind of gave me a different perspective. Was I interested in the monastery? Not particularly, but I still was, open to this idea in a new way that I never thought I would be. Well, then, come around the spring semester of my sophomore year, right before it starts, in January, I was invited by the campus ministry director, Father Killian, who's also a monk of St. Vincent, to go to San Antonio, Texas, for the Focus Fellowship of Catholic University Students bi-yearly, it was then, now it's every year, Seek Conference. So it's a huge gathering of Catholic college students from around the country who go to a big host city for the week and spend time in talks, in somewhat small group discussions and fun activities, meeting a bunch of different religious orders and religious organizations, prayer, mass, adoration, the whole shebang. And that year there was about, I want to say 15,000 college students. It's grown. It's now like 23,000. It's unreal. It's awesome. If you're ever planning on going to a Seek, if you're going to Salt Lake City this year, come out to the St. Vincent Archabbey Vocations, because I will be there representing the monastery and the podcast. So it'd be cool to see you. Anyways, so I was invited by Father Killian to go down to Texas with a couple other students for this conference. Now, it started out by real trial by fire, because instead of flying from Pittsburgh to San Antonio like normal people would do, we took a bus. We actually paired with WVU, West Virginia University, took a bus with their Catholic campus ministry group, and took a bus all the way down from West Virginia to Texas, which was 34 hours. Pretty miserable. Actually, I was in the way back of the bus. And on buses, like they have footrests that kind of slide up and down. I had the one seat that had a metal bar across the whole thing. and it didn't move up or down. And it was too high to get your feet over, but too low to get your feet under. So you just kind of had to sit with my knees slightly bent the entire time. Super uncomfortable, kind of purgation. But we did have adoration on the bus, which was metal, and mass on the bus, which is pretty fire too. So the Lord sanctified the experience, really gave us a crash course in suffering before entering, which in a way I think actually kind of broke down some walls and barriers for me to then receive what he had for me that week. So get to the conference. It's awesome. Super inspired by some of the speakers and just the witness of all of these other Catholic college students there. And up to this point in my discernment, I kind of had not let it go by the wayside, but it wasn't really something I was actively caring about at this point. It's kind of like I'm pursuing biochemistry. I'm going to get a good job. I'm going to make a lot of money. I guess I'll have a family, or maybe I'll figure something else out. Maybe I'll work in the church to some capacity, but I still want to be able to make money. I want to be comfortable. But all things kind of changed at this conference because I was planning. So the way the conference works, they have these big keynote all group sessions in the morning and then in the evening. And then in the afternoons, you can go to what are called breakout impact sessions. So there's different ones spread around the whole convention center, and you can kind of pick which one you want to go to. So I was planning on going to a talk by Sister Miriam James, which you've heard of her. She's awesome, a Salt sister. Super cool. Really inspired because she was a volleyball player before she became a nun, and I love volleyball. I also played volleyball. Got this kind of connection. I did meet her when she came to St. Vincent. Super cool. Anyways, so I was planning on going to her talk, right? Well, I get there 20 minutes before it's supposed to start, and they've already closed the doors because there's max capacity. Kind of okay, well, that was my plan. And the people at the door if you go to one of the mega sessions in the big conference rooms, those will never hit max capacity. Okay, well, I didn't really want to go to any of those, but sure, let's do it. So, I'm looking around, there's 3 mega sessions going on. None of them sound particularly up my alley, but there was one by Jason Everett, I am a big fan. I love Jason Everett. He's awesome. He's been very helpful for me in a lot of ways, and in my ministry and helping other men and women with dating, relationships, addiction recovery, of all that kind of thing. So I've heard his stuff before. I really was a fan of his in high school. So I was like, okay, you know what? I like Jason Everett. He's probably going to talk about something related to sexuality or pornography or something that is good reminders for us. But I got in there. I actually didn't even look at the topic. I only saw on the jumbo screen before I walked in speaker Jason Everett, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll go into this one. Well, I get in there, and he's actually talking about Pope John Paul II and his model of sainthood, because he had recently written a book at that point about Pope John Paul II, which I got later and got him to sign. Super cool. Well, so listen to this talk about sainthood. I'm like, okay, this is actually way different than I was expecting. This is really awesome. Started taking notes. And at one point, he was talking about how Pope John Paul felt the call to be a priest and enter the seminary, which was crazy at the time because in Poland, they were closing seminaries, the Nazis, that is, and persecuting any new priests and seminarians because they're trying to force them to join the Nazi army. Well, Pope John Paul went ahead and did it anyways because he felt that compelled by the Lord to follow his vocation. And Jason made a comment. He's like, yeah, that's what discernment does. Once you have truly done discernment well, nothing can shake you from what God calls you to do. And he was about to move on, and he said, you know what? Wait. I need to backtrack here for a second because I use the word discernment, and I bet you all think I know what I mean, but I'm going to tell you what I actually mean. And this has stuck with me since that day, which was over 7 years ago. And he said, discernment is an active process. You cannot passively discern the will of God. So some of you, when you say the word discernment or that you're discerning, what you're saying is really, I'm going to do what I'm planning on doing. And unless God drops something completely different in my lap, I'm going to assume that what I'm doing is his will. And you know what? A lot of you are going to kind of ride through life on that assumption. And for some of you, you might be right. But for some of you, you might not be. And you're missing out on the fullest grace and joy of this life because you haven't actually discerned. If you really want to discern God's will, you have to do something about it. If you're discerning priesthood, go visit a seminary or go visit a friary. Go visit a convent if you're discerning religious life as a woman. If you're discerning marriage, actually ask someone out on a date and intend it for a future, not just for a one-time thing or just to have fun. Really do something about it. And that hit me like a dagger, because what I had been doing was that total passive kind of like, ooh, discernment, which if you've heard this line before, it also rings very true, which is, since discernment has become popular, no one has actually ever made a decision. That's because we are talk about, oh, discern, think about God's will, but no one's actually doing anything about it. If you're really discerning, that means you're daily praying about God's will and also doing something in your own action towards what you believe it could be. Because if it turns out it's not, you at least have made steps. If it turns out it is, you're already on the right path. So I was very convicted. I'm like, okay, that's 100% what I've been doing. Just kind of riding along in this like biochemistry train, thinking like, I'm gonna make good money if I work for the church. Like, gotta be happy with that. I'll have a family. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't really feel that strong urge to be a priest as much as I used to. So maybe I was just kind of deceiving myself, or I was kind of in a euphoria because I thought priesthood was cool. I was in adoration. I had this Jesus high, and the closest thing to me at that point was a priest. So that must be what I was doing right. I kind of deceived myself into all of these things, into thinking that, oh, maybe I was just psyching myself out. But no, I realized I had just not been actually discerning. I'd been discerning, but not really. So at that point, I decided, okay, we need to do something different about this. Now, did I do it right away? No. I wanted to hang out with my friends. There was actually a girl who was there that I was really interested in, and then I kind of was like, well, I don't really want to mess that up by like figuring out God's will now. Maybe I'll wait after she says yes or no if she wants to go out or something. Well, lo and behold, that night is adoration. Now, if you've ever been to a Sikh conference or NCYC or anything like that, their adorations are insane. If you can imagine packing tens of thousands of people into one room to adore Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, it just takes it up a notch. Well, I've been out to dinner with the people from my group, and by the time we actually got back to the convention center, it was like right on time. So that meant we were in the way back. And I'm looking at, the speaker and Jesus when the adoration starts on this mega jumbotron, like just way, like a football field away from the monstrance. And like, it just felt so impersonal. How am I going to connect with Jesus here? So, but, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Well, that's the first. We had a keynote speaker, a Sister Bethany Madonna. Awesome, just awesome. And that kind of set me in the right mood, but I was still kind of just like a little bit out of it. I was tired, We're in the way back. It just felt so off. Well, adoration finally starts. We kneel down on cement floor, and it's not long, and I just like, bro, I want to dip. This is awful. I'm kneeling on cement. I have no connection, I feel, with Jesus. He's so far away. People are, praying with each other. The confession line snaking around behind me, and the people are kind of talking to each other in there. Super distracting. When am I going to, actually pray? This is just not going to happen. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm probably going to leave. I give it 5 minutes. My hotel is just across the street. No one's going to notice. And I can actually get some sleep tonight. Well, I was literally this close to doing that. But in the last instant, I thought okay, you know what? I need to give God at least a chance. So I made a prayer. It's all right, Holy Spirit, if you want something to happen, you have to do it, because I can't do anything. Holy cow. What happened next was incredible. So first, it was like binoculars were put on my eyes, and I got zoomed into the monstrance, and it was like Jesus was right in front of my face. And then all of the noise and everything around me, it was like someone put earplugs in, and I couldn't hear a thing. All that there was in that room now was me and Jesus. And for the first time in my entire life, I wanted nothing else but to look at him. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to do anything. I just needed to be there. And in just being silent and just being there, I also recognized more fully, not that I had not ever seen it before, but I really saw more fully that time, the absolute love that there is in Jesus in the Eucharist. It's just the profound, overwhelming personal love of Christ in that little host that is Jesus was there for me. I'm not a particularly emotional person. You can ask most of my family and friends. I don't really laugh that hard a lot of the time, and I certainly don't cry very often. But boy, did I break down like a little kid. I was bawling and bawling and bawling, and not from like sadness or like guilt or overwhelm, just like, holy cow, this is Jesus. There's nothing else I need in my life right now. There's nothing else I need in my life ever. This is Christ, and he is here for me. And that's it. The love that I felt was different. I don't know how else to say it. It was different than anything I'd ever experienced. And I knew it was real, and I could not deny its reality. So I just sat there. Knelt there, really, for I don't actually know how long. The adoration slot, I think, was like 3 hours. And I was just there for such a long time, just receiving. And the Lord doesn't say anything. I wasn't saying anything, just being there. And that truly is what prayer really is the goal of our prayer. Not that I was, merited anything or I finally gotten to this point, but the goal of our prayer should just be able to sit before God, love him, and receive his love in return. He took me into that, right? I had not gotten there in any sense of the word of my own. He brought me into himself. Well, sitting there for a long time, I finally thought, like, okay, calm down. Like, this is good. This is so good. I want to pray into this. I want to lean into this experience a little bit. So I said, okay, Jesus, like, you're giving me this incredible love through the Eucharist that is so undeniable. What do you want me to do with it today, right? And I wasn't making that big, what do you want to do with it in my life kind of question yet. No, it was just, what do you want to do with me now that I have experienced and seen this love for me and that it's real? And the words of the Lord came very clear to my heart, and when I say that to people, I don't say like, oh, I heard a second voice, right? That was foreign to my own. No, when I say that the Lord spoke to me, I mean a conviction came upon my heart and in my head that was not from me, right? These are not words, these are not ideas that I put together from somewhere else or something like, ooh, that makes sense. That's good. Let's go with it. They truly came and were there, and again, undeniable that it was not from me. So I felt the Lord really say to me in my prayer in response, I need you to love all people like they themselves are the Eucharist. Because if you receive the love from me, from it, that invokes in you a desire to love me in return. And if you see everyone else like the Eucharist, you will love them as they are meant to be loved. Now that's kind of an earth-shaking, word from God. To love them like we are called to love him in the Eucharist. Love one another as I have loved you. That is exactly what he's saying. Love one another as I love you. At that time, my name was Samuel. Samuel, love one another as I love you in this Eucharist. I was like, okay, Jesus, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try. It's my daily goal. I pretty much suck at it, but we still try, right? Well, I just sat with that, asking for his strength and for his grace in that moment. But then I realized, like, okay, Lord, who needs that love right now? Who can I pray for right now? Well, and at the time, came to mind, again, he put on my heart, my sister, Sarah, who she's a great fan of this podcast. Love you, Sarah. I'm sure you're watching. Hi, Ellie. It's my niece that she's watching with, I'm sure. It's so good to see. I love you guys. Anyway, so my sister came to my heart. And at that time, we weren't necessarily the closest. There was a lot of family strife going on at the time, and just like differences, just kind of everyone going their own way, just like emotions and, lots of stuff, family stuff. But I hadn't been close to my sister for a while. And I didn't really know what was going on in her life, other than it was kind of rough. But I didn't know any specifics. But I knew at that moment to pray for her. So I did. And later, after the fact, about the next day, I reached out to her just saying, hey, I prayed for you last night in adoration. I hope you're doing okay. And she came back and she did say that that was so needed, and that the night before had been one of the hardest she'd had in a long, long time. Which is just proof that your prayers are needed for other people. Especially when someone who you don't really think of very often comes to mind. It's not a random occurrence. It's the Holy Spirit reminding you that that person is in need of your specific prayers for them right then. So that's what Jesus was saying. Like, I need you to love your sister like she is the love of the Eucharist. So I was able to pray for her from a distance for a while. Well, then I was like, okay, well, still riding this high. Might as well take the opportunity to ask Jesus the big question, right? Which was, okay, Jesus, how do you want me to love like this in my whole life? What is my vocation? What are you calling me to do in my life? And when I've shared this story with some people, it's not that I feel that God has laughed at my face, but I almost felt like a fatherly chuckle from him, which was, Samuel, you know it already. You know what I've called you to. You just haven't accepted it. But now it's time to man up and to be the priest that I've called you to be. And that was it. Like, that was it. And at that moment, I knew that Jesus 100% desired me to be a priest. And since that day, that conviction has never died. Has my fidelity to morality died sometimes? Yeah. Have I done my own thing? Yes. Have I, let college and peer pressure and all those things get in the way after the fact? Yep. I was, did not get on like this Jesus train right away, even after such an amazing experience. But the conviction that he called me die, no. And that held me through some major trials that came the next year, which I experienced anxiety attack and depression for the first time, and some severe loneliness and just recurrence of a lot of different things that I thought I had got over in my life. But the reality that God had called me to himself to be a priest was undeniable, and I was able to cling to that in difficulty. Well, so I knew God was calling me to be a priest. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, that's great, Brother Francisco. Where does the whole monk thing come into this, right? We came on here to see why you became a monk, not just why you're becoming a priest. Because I obviously became a monk first. I'm not yet ordained. Soon. I can't wait. Less than 2 years. We're going down on the pipeline. But the whole monk thing, how did that happen? Well, coming back after that January and that following Lent, I decided a Lenten resolution I wanted to make for myself was to go to morning prayer with the monks regularly, like 3 or 4 days a week. Now, it's hard for me to get up now as a monk still, after being in here for more than 5 years. Honestly, it was only God's grace that I was running on at that point in my college experience, because I was staying up way later and getting up earlier than I do now. And I don't know, it was wild. But I did it. And for a while, it was just something that I really enjoyed and just was very beautiful and powerful for me. But there was one day, most of the time I got there like right as morning prayer started, or maybe like a minute or two late. But there was one day I got there actually early. And I was sitting there, the lights were still dim, everything was silent. A few monks were praying as others were coming in silently getting ready for prayer. And I sat there, said to myself, man, this is pretty cool. I could almost see myself doing this, which was the first time I'd ever really said that out loud to myself, right? Or thought the idea of like, well, maybe I'll be a monk. Well, as I said that, maybe this could almost be something I could see myself doing. Whoosh! Down came the Spirit, and again, a conviction on my heart, because this is your home. This is to where I have called you. Yeah. Even as I think about it now, it's a bit overwhelming. And that was it. Like that's all I needed. That's all I needed. My discernment was really handed to me by Jesus. I didn't have to go back and forth with a lot of difficulties. Yeah, no, I still went out with the girl for a little while, but even then, we both knew that I was probably going to become a monk. Deep down, I always knew I was going to, because it was just undeniable. Again, I can't think of a better word than undeniable that the Lord called me. So my experience is pretty unique. And the Lord really came down and touched me very specifically in calling me to this life. And after that, I knew I was called to St. Vincent. I didn't have to look at a bunch of other monasteries. I didn't think about, maybe religious life as a Franciscan or Dominican. It was Benedictine, St. Vincent, and priesthood. That was my goal. And that's what I knew God was calling me to. So, of course, that would be my goal. Well, over 5 years later, I am solemnly professed by a year now. Getting ready for my diaconate ordination in this coming May, and priesthood the May after that. And the Lord continues to work in crazy, awesome ways. Has it been an easy time since that conviction, since that call? Absolutely not. When God calls you, Satan's right around the corner to make you doubt it. But hold on, because God's plan for you is truly the adventure of a lifetime. So that's why I became a monk. That's why I'm here. That's why I love just being a monk, because I know that this is what God calls me to be. Well, thank you for hanging on. I know that's a bit longer today, but it's worth sharing every detail with you all. And if you have any questions about, how did things grow after the fact, or that period of difficulty, like what was that, or, what about doubts you had after you became a monk? Those are things I'm happy to talk to you about. If you have any questions on that, I'd love to hear from you. If you're discerning yourself or you have questions about discernment, please leave a comment below. Share this with someone if you think the vocation story might be helpful for them. Yeah, whatever it is, know that God is calling you to something great. Thank you for joining me today. I am Brother Francisco Whitaker. This is All Good in the Brotherhood. Have a wonderful day. God bless.